Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Bullony Basketball. Here with Johnny. How have you been, Johnny?
Going on, Garrett? Early morning. Well, I don't want to say too early morning, but early morning Sunday episode. Kind of just the way the playoffs roll, guys. Want to get out that content at the end of one round and before the second round starts. Doesn't always work, so bear with us as we walk through this. But excited to kind of talk about what we saw in the first round.
Yeah, we had a longer break between games. Time to just, sit back, relax, and enjoy some of the playoff games. But now we're back. So we're kind of just going to recap some of the first round series. Of course, at the time we're recording this, the Clippers and Mavericks still have to play later today. But we'll give our angles like on each side of that. Let's start with though the 1-8 in the East. You know, Philadelphia and Washington. What were your big takeaways, do you think, from this series?
Yeah, it's hard to take a lot away from a 1-8 series in most cases, unless that series goes like 7 games or if the 8 seed actually wins it. But there really wasn't much. Washington stole 1 game. Embiid missed a couple games. So I guess in terms of that, the big takeaway is just Embiid's health. Because for the Sixers team to meet their aspirations of making the finals and winning the finals, they obviously need their superstar, their best player, Joel Embiid, to be healthy. Um, so we'll monitor that. Somehow that injury related to the meniscus is considering him day to day. But from what I've been reading, it's similar to that Andrew Bynum injury, and you can play through it, but then you just have to deal with the repercussions that come. Um, and if that's what Embiid does, and that's what happens to Embiid, that's going to be quite the rest of his career because we do not want to see him sitting on the bench dealing with that knee injury at all times. So really, my huge takeaway in that is just Joel Embiid's health.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this series might have been the least interesting. Like I think we saw signs from Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons in this series where it's like, okay, without Embiid, they can hold down the fort and potentially get them to the conference finals. Say if Embiid can't go at all next round, but obviously that's a concern for the Wizards. I mean, they're like in a weird spot anyways. But I think you saw good things from Hachimura, from Gafford in this series, so I guess that's pretty good. Um, and I guess in this series more than any other, like like the fan incidents, where throwing popcorn at Westbrook and like the other fan like running on the court. I feel like that's just like kind of out of hand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks that we even are drawing more attention to it, but we have to draw attention to it in order to kind of reflect on what happened. But that stuff needs to just kind of go by the wayside. I understand that we've all been locked up and haven't been able to do anything for months on months on months, but that doesn't mean that you can just go into an arena and completely forget how to act in public. That stuff needs to be stopped right now.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. Let's move on to the 2-7 in the East, which was Boston and Brooklyn. Um, I feel like there's not much to talk about, really. Just about the Nets, kind of, they were getting the chemistry together. Of course, Harden the other day, went out with the game 1 injury against the Bucks, but it seemed like they were starting to get some good chemistry going. And then also, the front office changes with the Boston Celtics. Brad Stevens moving to where Danny Ainge is, and then Danny Ainge, kind of taking a step down. So, like, I guess, what are your thoughts on that for Boston?
Yeah, I mean, Danny Ainge isn't taking a step down; he's taking a step completely out. Reports have him as retiring, but then he's been linked to Utah or another possible destination. Um, I think we've I think we've finally been able to confirm that Jason Tatum is a budding superstar, and I'm going to use the word superstar and not just star. Um, from somebody that played against LeBron James in Game 7 of the conference finals as a rookie and dunked on him to now 3 years later, I want to say 4 years later, maybe at the age of 23, drop a 50, drop a 50 point game on a team with Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. Um, he did a lot of very extraordinary things, and he is one heck of a player. Um, him and Jaylen Brown, I mean, they leave Brad Stevens in good hands. But the question is, where do they go with the coaching, with the whole coaching side of things? There are candidates out there, but I'm not sure that there are any candidates out there that are like kind of striking me as somebody that is like the next superstar coach. You have Chauncey Billups, you have Sam Cassell. Do you want to go to the broadcasting booth and steal a Jeff Van Gundy? Is it even possible to pry Juwan Howard out from Michigan? And if so, never coached a game in the NBA in his career. So there's just a lot of like weird dynamics there. Jason Kidd, like I don't understand that. He's already kind of shown that he can't be a super successful head coach. So there's a lot of questions to be answered in Boston. Probably going to move on from Kemba Walker if they can this summer. Um, so really, it's just where do they go to build around that Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown core?
Yeah, not much more to add. I mean, the only thing I would have was kind of like what you just said at the end there. Like they're also going to be making, I feel like, a lot of roster shakeups around Tatum and Brown. It'll be interesting to see if Marcus Smart's included in that or not, because I know a lot of people have been putting him in trade rumors, but a lot of people think he's, like the heart and soul of the team as well. So that should be something to look out for. But I think Kemba, very well could be traded. And yeah, I mean that should be something to look out for. Let's move on
I
to.
mean,
Oh wait, sorry, my bad. Do you have
yeah, I was
something?
just say quickly, yeah, on that whole Marcus Smart thing, if you're trying to get something valuable in return for Kemba Walker, you're gonna have to throw in an asset or two, just given that contract and his injury history. So Kemba or Marcus Smart may be one of those guys that you throw in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that will be the case too. But for the Bucks Heat, the next series with the 3-6 matchup, um, this might have been the most surprising outcome, especially since what happened last year in the bubble, where like the Heat basically had their way with the Bucks. Now this year is like the opposite way. Outside of Game One, it really wasn't much of a series. Uh, but what were your thoughts on this matchup this time around?
The Dude, I mean, it's so hard to tell who we learn more from in the series, right? Because you can go bubble fluke for the Heat, but I'm not so sure that that was so much of a fluke as it was just them having good players and a good coach with a good general manager. I'm sure some of the guys played above their heads, but you still had Jimmy Butler, you still had Bam Adebayo. Then you look at the Bucks. Um, this is the best we've seen the Bucks look, right? First playoff series with Drew Holiday added in on that squad. It sucks now that Dante DiVincenzo's out for the rest of the playoffs. I think that's a bigger loss than people understand. Starter on this team, sometimes in the closing lineup. Um, so adjustments have to be made coming into the round two series. But there was just like so much that we learned. Giannis was able to take games over. Chris Middleton is still efficient and a great scorer. Drew Holiday's a lockdown defender and also a playmaker on the offensive end. So they have three very, very good pieces to build around. Just a matter of how they put it together. Big takeaway is just Mike Budenholzer not playing his guys minutes as he should. Um, this is the playoffs. This is the time that your stars play 40 plus minutes. Um, we need to get back to that, and we'll talk about that when we preview the Bucks Nets series. But I think some coaching adjustments have to be on the horizon.
Yeah, and I mean, just to add to that, like, I think Giannis took this series a lot more, seriously. A lot like when he played Boston in 2019 after getting eliminated by them the year before. I feel like he was thinking to himself, like, we can't let the same thing happen again. And I mean, he kind of had his way with Bam, and you know, Jimmy last year, he took the responsibility of stopping Giannis, but I mean, not only that, but he really wasn't producing much on the offensive end. So, I mean, I believe Bryn Forbes outscored him in the series. So, I mean, like when you're the top 10, top 15 player in the league, where people are like always saying that about you, you can't let that happen. Like simple as that. So I think part of it was just the Heat not playing that great. Part of it was also the new look Bucks showing out. And then, like you said, with like DiVincenzo's injury, it stinks. I don't think it's quite as bad as like obviously if Drew Holiday got hurt or a few years ago like when Brogdon got hurt. Like I don't know if he's one of those top 3, 4. Like they could actually get through it. I think without DiVincenzo. But that's a big loss. Like you don't want to lose someone like that that's in the rotation.
And I guess just quickly to sum up that series in a couple words, I'd say everything went right for the Bucks, nothing went right for the Heat, or everything went right for the Bucks, everything went wrong for the Heat. That's kind of how I'd sum it up.
Yeah. But now the 4-5 matchup in the Eastern Conference, we had the Knicks and the Hawks. I think a lot of people thought this would be the best or the longest series in the first round, and it really didn't. The first two games were pretty good, and then I think after that, Atlanta kind of asserted dominance. Um, but what were your takeaways from this one?
Is there a bigger discrepancy of a head coach in the regular season versus a head coach in the postseason? And I don't mean that as slander against Tom Thibodeau, but I mean it as a coach that's literally willing to play his starters 40 plus minutes in the regular season, do all these great things, then come playoff time, there's no adjustment there. It's just same as the regular season. Whereas you got guys on the Hawks, your star players play 32, 33, 34, 35, 36 minutes, and come playoff time, if Trae Young needs to play 42, so be it. We can make that adjustment. Um, but the Knicks were just such a good regular season team, and I think I even said it when we previewed, like, the Knicks weren't supposed to be here. So even them losing in the first round is a possible scenario, and one that shouldn't even make this season considered a failure. I had Hawks in 7. I thought it would be a little more competitive. Julius Randle couldn't score a golf ball in a large size basketball hoop if he wanted to. Just couldn't get anything going. And when your star player shows up like that, more times than not, you're going to lose.
Yeah, and I mean, I have just down here. It was pretty much like the Bucks versus Heat series, except the Knicks at least won a game. Because it seemed like games 3, 4, and 5, just like games 2, 3, and 4 with the Bucks Heat series, like Atlanta kind of had control over it the whole time. And then game 1, of course, came down to like a final shot. So I feel like in a way they were kind of similar. Trae Young, I think what he was doing at Madison Square Garden, kind of similar to like what Reggie Miller used to do, like kind of becoming like the villain there. So that was kind of cool to see. Um, yeah, Julius Randle, not a great series. Of course, this is his first one, but you also got to realize like this is his 7th year in the league, and you can't really use it as an excuse when Trae Young, who has less experience, it's his first series as well, and he's out here performing. We'll get to the Suns Lakers in a second, but like with Devin Booker, it was his first series too. John Morant and the Grizzlies. So there's other guys that they're making their playoff debuts this year, and they all showed out, but of course he didn't. I think RJ he played better in the last game, but like he struggled for most of the series. Reggie Bullock he was kind of talking like out of his butt. I feel like on Twitter, like I don't even know what he was going on about. Um, but a lot of the Knicks like didn't play good. I mean, it was like I'm sure you enjoyed to see it as much as I did, but it was good to see D Rose, at least play well because this is a guy that I feel like a lot of people don't realize how valuable he was when he was on the team playing in the regular season. If he had played for a full season's worth, they would have probably been the first seed record wise. If you translate that to like a full season, um, but he always performs in the playoffs. Like you can go back to the Timberwolves game series when they played Houston. He was arguably their best player, and people thought like just a month before that, maybe his career was over. So like you can never count him out too. So I think if there was one bright spot for the Knicks and possibly someone they want to bring back in the offseason, then that's the guy.
Yeah, and I just my quick wrap up summarize for this series is a lot of talk on both sides, but only Atlanta was able to walk that talk, and you saw it translate games 2 through 5.
Yeah, kind of like the Clippers last year. Except this one, I don't even think it got to the point where it's like you could blow anything. Like they weren't close to even competing. Like the talent discrepancy was pretty visible. But let's move on to the
Yeah.
Western Conference with the Jazz and Grizzlies, the 1-8. I mean, probably not much here, but what'd you find from the series?
I mean, no Donovan Mitchell. Memphis is able to steal a game. Donovan Mitchell comes, and it's a sweep. similar, the 1-8 in the East, right? There's not a whole lot to talk about. Um, Make sure your best player's healthy. And, well, I guess we don't need to get into the argument. Make sure your best players are healthy. Whether or not you think that's Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert, that's a debate for another day. But make sure Donovan Mitchell's healthy. He's the guy that makes that team go, at least on the offensive end. Um, Memphis, I think they've done everything right the last couple of years. This is great. They finally have some playoff experience. They have a building block. They have John Morant. Um, Desmond Bain is a great shooter, and they just have pieces around those two. Jaren Jackson Jr., D'Anthony Melton's a player. Xavier Tillman looked good. Grayson Allen hits shots. So a lot of youth on that team. A lot of bright spots to look forward to. Finally got that experience, but outside of that, not a whole lot that I took away.
Yeah, I mean, no Mitchell, no problem. This series kind of went as I expected. I believe I picked the Jazz in 5, but that's what it ended up as. Grizzlies play well the first game. Other than that, like the Jazz kind of withstood every single run they made after. And I think Ja and Dylan Brooks. I mean, as the backcourt for the Grizzlies, I mean, I think that's got to be good to see how well that they performed as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, I mean, that's pretty much it for that series. We can move on though to the Suns and the Lakers. I feel like this one might be one of the bigger ones. So we both, I believe, picked the Lakers to win. But of course, the Suns won in 6. But what were your takeaways from this series?
Yeah, so I had, just to preface, I had Lakers in 6. Um, Injuries were prevalent throughout the whole series. It was game 1 that Chris Paul went down with his shoulder injury. And then from there on out, the outlook of the series just looked bleak, right? Like he was turning the ball over. He couldn't even dribble with his right hand. He wasn't even confident enough or didn't even feel good enough to take that little mid-range jumper that he's known for. So once that injury happened, I was like, this series is over. Lakers come back, they win games 2 and 3. They're up 2-1. It's like the Suns are literally on the brink of elimination. You lose game 4, and this series is toast. Um, but they go out and they win 3 straight. Anthony Davis goes out with that groin injury, misses game 5. It was a 2-2 series. Suns win that. That was going into game 5. I thought we were going to see a vintage LeBron game. And I know that LeBron's ankle is hurting him, but a game where he says these shoulders were built to carry teams like this. Um, and literally he couldn't hit anything. They lose that. Game 6 to me, as crazy as it sounds, felt like an elimination game for the Suns again. Because you do not want to see LeBron James in a game 7, just plain and simple. And they come out and they win it. Anthony Davis should have never ever tried to even play in game 6. Clearly that groin was bothering him, and he didn't even re-aggravate it. They just said the pain was so much from that lateral movement. I think that if AD just sat from the beginning, the Lakers would have had a better shot in the game because they would have game planned with the assumption that Anthony Davis is not playing. When you game plan with the assumption that Anthony Davis is playing, you have guys on the bench who are not assuming to take on big roles. You're not assuming that Markieff Morris is going to have a role in this game, or you're not assuming that Wesley Matthews is going to have a big role. But push come to shove, they now need to step up and play 30-some minutes. But can we just give props to Devin Booker, man? The guy is. I've been not hating on him, but I've just been saying, oh, he's always been doing this in the regular season. And now he has a team in the playoffs, and he's clearly been the best team on this. He's clearly been the best player on this team, and it's not even close. This Suns team has a legit shot to go to the finals. I think they have a great second round matchup, and then after that, I think they're a coin flip with whoever they face in the Western Conference Finals. So this is going to be a wild ride, and I can't wait to see where the Suns go.
Yeah, well, I feel like it was an elimination game kind of for the Suns in Game 6 because of how they started off, and then the Lakers, obviously they weren't just gonna fold like that in the first quarter with their season on the line. So if Phoenix would have lost that game, it probably would have taken a lot out of them mentally, and then they probably I don't even know if they'd have enough for Game 7. But just talk about like the Suns. I mean, you mentioned like Devin Booker was pretty much unreal, scoring like 47 in a closeout game. And DeAndre Ayton, he played pretty well all series. I feel like a lot of Suns fans, were skeptical about him throughout the regular season, maybe thinking like he could be are, Achilles heel when it comes to playoff time. And I think Chris Paul, dealing with the shoulder injury, he still showed that like he can have an impact on the game, whether or not it's like putting the ball in the basket or like I mean, we saw in like the first two games, he was turning the ball over, he couldn't dribble the ball, but yeah, he still had an impact on the game. Like I don't know how many players can actually do that when they're not able to do what they physically want to do. Um, Cameron Payne is insane. Like I feel like this isn't like the Bulls Cameron Payne that like we both used to remember. Um, like I think he's out to try and get like some revenge as well. And of course, like the Lakers, they had their injuries, and Kuzma wasn't that great. Dennis Schroeder had like an 0 for 9 game. Um, but I was kind of disappointed just with how LeBron played. And I mean that might be too much because his ankle was bothering him, whatever. But I mean when you say like when you tweet out like a storm is coming, and then when you're saying like these shoulders were meant to carry, and this is the first time I think he's lost a series and didn't score 30 points in a single game since the 2011 finals, and we remember how that went. It just didn't feel like he had that kind of game. Like he didn't really have one of those games where you're like, oh, LeBron just took over. And at some points in the series, it made it seem like maybe AD is the most valuable Laker because their two games that they won, AD scored, I believe, like 34 and 33, and he was probably the best player in both of those. And then, the last two games when he was like most injured, they're down like almost 30 or over 30 at some point in the game. And that's just, I feel like that just can't happen. The other thing I will say is for everyone, I've seen a lot of Laker fans kind of get crazy about it. But, talking about like the injury with AD, and as that's the reason they lost. But I think, the playoffs start like when the playoffs start. You know what LeBron always says, and how the Lakers, how they're taking game one as a feeler game. But maybe they shouldn't have done that now. Because that first game, that was a close game. The Suns didn't play great. They very well could have won it, but a lot of them struggled. I believe, like, the Lakers were shooting, like, what, 20% in the first half? Like, you can't do that. And if they win that game, they won games 2 and 3, they go up 3-0, they probably win. So, I mean, just another thing to look at there. But, I mean, you got to give credit to the Suns. They earned it. Booker was amazing. Ayton was great. And I think Jay Crowder wanted revenge too, like based on the last few games.
I mean, first round series LeBron has ever lost in his career. First time we've been saying we haven't seen this LeBron since like 2011. He's in his 18th season. He's 36 years old. He has an ankle injury. I'm not trying to give him excuses or anything, but it's incredible that it's taken him this long, that we hold him the standards so high, that this is the first time since then that we've really said he's underperforming. But we can argue that the Lakers just wasted another year of LeBron's career that is winding down, or that we assume is quickly winding down, at least with LeBron being the alpha on the team. So a lot of offseason changes to be made on this roster, and Lakers got to figure out how they can put the puzzle back together.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be a shakeup in LA, I think, as well. But speaking of shakeups, I think we're going to come up to a team that might have one as well. Uh, Denver and Portland. I believe before the series, I think you picked Denver in 7, and I think I picked Portland in 6. Of course, Denver winning didn't even go to a game 7. It just seemed like the Blazers, Damian Lillard did just about everything that I think he could. Dropping 55 in a double overtime game, probably one of the craziest shooting games we've ever seen. And then you have like Robert Covington missing open dunks. You have C.J. McCollum stepping on the sideline. Norman Powell missing free throws and an open layup. Nurkic in foul trouble almost every game. So it's like, what more can this guy do? Like he scored over like half the team's points. And it just seemed like the Nuggets, I feel like a lot of people don't realize, like, yeah, they didn't have Jamal Murray, and yeah, they didn't have Will Barton, but the Nuggets, they're still, like, a really good team. Michael Porter Jr., he has, like, star potential, and he's almost like playing like an all-star ever since Jamal Murray went out. Monte Morris, he very well could be a starting point guard in a lot of these teams. Austin Rivers, he's very well capable of going off, and he did in, I think, game 3. And then, Campazzo, he's almost like Patrick Beverly, except, just better. I don't know how else to put it. Like, he's just like Patrick Beverly, except he can kind of like back up some of the stuff that he does, being like a little gnat on defense. But just like with the Blazers, like, I think the little thing, and it's like hard watching because, being a Lillard fan, I can't watch this team when they like don't box out, they don't have any defensive effort, they have low IQ, and it's just bad to watch. And we'll get into the next series. I think there's some of that there as well. But CJ didn't play up to standards. He really hasn't since his injury. Robert Covington was bad. Nurkic always in foul trouble. So I feel like I know a lot of people are saying like, oh, Dame's gonna get traded now, but I feel like what they need to do more is like what the Rockets did with Harden, I think in like 2016, when they kind of reshaped the team around him. It was like with him and Dwight Howard, they got rid of Dwight, they got rid of like Jeremy Lin, and they brought in guys like Eric Gordon, Lou Williams, and like maybe more shooters, and they were actually not a bad defensive team once Chris Paul came along. But that's just my thoughts in the series. How about you?
Even even if we underrated Denver's roster to an extent, I think it's very possible to say that Portland has 5 of the 7 best players in the series. Jokic is the best player, Dame's the second best player, and then after those two, I think between the remaining 4 starters on the Trailblazers and Michael Porter Jr., those make up the top 7 players. I mean, you couldn't ask for much more if you're Portland. You're facing a team, yes, Nikola Jokic is incredible, but his second best player on that team is a player that last year couldn't even stay in late games because he can't defend. He hits big shots, but he can't defend. Their third best player could be considered Austin Rivers, a guy that they picked up mid-season just because they needed some reinforcements. Malone did an incredible job on the sideline, putting this team in a position to succeed, and they scrapped their way to victory. A lot of changes, like you said, for Portland. Terry Stotts already fired. Do they trade CJ? I think you just have to build around Dame, like you said. You don't want to let a guy like this go. You just got to find a way to manipulate the roster so that you put him in the position to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I personally still feel Dame is the best player in the series, but I think no matter what, it was going to come down to whoever's teammates were the ones hitting shots. And I mean, you can even go back from the shooting splits. Just about every single Nugget that was top 7, top 8 in the rotation was shooting about or over 40% from 3. And you can look at the Blazers. Not a lot of them were doing that. Like Robert Covington struggled. I think he airballed like almost once every other game. CJ wasn't finding his shot. Norman Powell, he had some good games in there, but of course, he's an up and down player as well. It just didn't seem like they had much consistency there. I feel like, Anthony Simons, Carmelo Anthony were probably the best bet for being consistent players alongside Lillard. And what does that say? Because those guys are probably like the 5th, 6th most important players on the team at best. So, I don't know. And I think, looking at the Nuggets, they had all these guys that were hitting shots. That's what it was going to come down to. And yeah, I think that Portland, I think they'll need to make some big shakeup. But I wouldn't trade Dame. I would try to get like stuff around him. Whether that involves trading CJ or not, it might be tough for Blazers fans, but you kind of gotta move on when the time is right.
Yeah, I agree. I think CJ's time comes to an end this summer.
Yeah. And then the last series that we got, of course, it's not over, but I think we kind of have a general idea about the takeaways from the series. The Clippers and the Mavericks tied 3-3. Game 7, but I mean, by the time this is uploaded, Game 7 will probably be over, but it'll be funny, like, I guess, to see, like, what we're saying before the final game. What do you think of this, series takeaway, and what do you think will happen in this game tonight?
Maybe it's a bad thing to tank the last game of the regular season and play for matchups. Because A, you would have played Portland, and B, if you won that, you would have avoided the Lakers. Um, but that's obviously something that we can look back on now. Every single road team has won the games thus far. So going by that, you have Dallas winning game 7. But I think the Clippers pull off game 7, man. I truly don't think that they lose this game. And my key takeaway is this is the single most important game in LA Clipper history. If you lose this, this is now 2 years in a row that you have not made the conference finals. You traded away everything you had for Paul George, and it can all be gone this summer. Um, where does this team go this summer if they don't win this series, let alone make the conference finals? Um, there's just so much riding on the line for this Clippers team. And then you go to the other side on Dallas, and they're playing with house money, man. I mean, Luka's 22 years old and already proving to be one of the best players in the league. He just needs a co-star. That's literally all he needs. And Porzingis is the guy they thought that would provide that, but he's been nothing but trash all series long. So where do they go this summer? They just look to continue to build around Luka. Like they have a clear path. Whereas the Clippers, if they lose, the train just fell off the tracks, like completely. So it's just two completely different things. One team playing with house money, one team like literally riding on the edge. So game 7 is going to be incredible, but I'm going to take the Clippers in a close one.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, that everyone's talking about, of course, with this series is, Luca, and, he's already a superstar. You could pick the top 10 players in the league, and, Luca's probably the only one that you'll find in there that's been in the league 5 or less seasons and is maybe like 25, younger than 25. I think he's that much ahead of just about everyone else at his, like, age group. But with that being said, like the Clippers, like I was saying, just with the Blazers, being that I'm a Kawhi fan, I do want them to succeed. It aggravates me. Like sometimes, like they have no motivation, they play like no defense. So that's why they're really hard to watch. And at points, I was just like, I wouldn't mind if the Clippers just lost and if Kawhi just left because he's a free agent in the summer. So like I think when they're down 2-0 when they got down 3-2, especially after Game 5, and that wasn't even a great game by Kawhi. And Terrence Mann passing out of a layup. I thought like that game could have been the turning point. But then Kawhi came out the next game and basically said, no, we're going to a Game 7. So I don't even know what to expect. One thing I do know is that this is going to be one of the weirder series of all time because there's literally been no home win so far. Like, I don't know, will that end today or will it just go down as like the home court disadvantage series or something like that? But yeah, I mean, that's I think the Clippers. I just can't, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the Mavericks, but I just can't picture the Mavericks in the second round instead of the Clippers. So with that being said, I'm probably going to take the Clippers, even though I won't be surprised. But I don't know. I
I
can't
mean,
picture
and if
it.
if the Clippers lose, it's game 7, it's at home, it's in the first round to a team that you literally to a team that you're playing against because you tanked your last regular season game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's not the bubble, it's not a neutral site. It's literally your home court. So everything is riding on the line for the Los Angeles Clippers.
And I don't even get why they did that because when they were in the middle of the game, like I believe they had a full quarter left. I think they were winning, and like the Blazers, I think that was when they were beating the Nuggets at the end of the season, and they were like going to secure that 6 seed. I don't know why they wouldn't just try and win and get the 3 seed to play Portland, who they swept in the regular season, basically were killing them. But rather they played Dallas, who they lost the regular season series with, and I think they got blown out by 50 one game. So like I don't know why. Like yeah,
It was literally just to avoid playing LA in the second round, who's now out of the playoffs. So yes, looking back in hindsight, very easy to do that. But a lot of times tanking a game for a specific team doesn't necessarily play out the way you want it to, and karma comes back to bite you. And we could very well see that this afternoon.
And yeah, we'll see. But I mean, in the second round now, like with some of these teams, it's going to be an interesting second round. You know, you already got like Atlanta, you already got Phoenix. Uh, you know, Dallas could potentially be there. That's like three young teams that could be, you know, on the horizon. The Sixers, the Bucks, you know, the Nuggets and the Jazz, like those teams, they're still pretty young. They've been there though. And then I think the Nets are like the only team with like actual experience. So I feel like it's a really young second round. But in terms of like these series, um, like what are your thoughts going in the second round?
Yeah, I'll run through these quickly. Actually, the first thing I want to note is if the Clippers win, every single team that had the higher seed, or I guess the lower seed, will have won. Because you have a one, oh no, I'm sorry. Atlanta was the 5 seed. So I take that back. I'll do a quick preview of these series. So we kind of already talked about it with Philly. If Embiid's healthy, I think they beat the Hawks in 6. If Embiid's not healthy, I think it's a coin flip. And I would actually take Atlanta in 7. Um, just the way that the Hawks are playing, Trae Young is here. Bogdanovich makes big shots. Capella's great down low. You got those three, and then you have supporting cast Lou Williams off the bench. Gallinari can hit some shots. Hunter's a good defender. So that's my quick overview of that series. Go down into 2-3 in the East. Brooklyn is already up 1-0 at this point, but James Harden had to leave the game with a hamstring injury. So once again, injuries play a part here. If Harden is not healthy, um, coin flip, but I would actually take Brooklyn in 7. Harden is healthy, I take Brooklyn in 6. I just think it's too much. I think Budenholzer just gets outcoached so much in the playoffs that at a certain point when he plays good teams, it comes back to bite him. Whether or not he makes those adjustments, I don't know, but we've seen it for 3, 4, 5 years in a row where he just doesn't make those adjustments. Um, Going to the west side of the bracket, I'm going to stick with the series that we already know is happening. Phoenix, Denver, the 2-3. I think Phoenix wins it. Phoenix wins it in 6. Just think it becomes a point where Denver's playing a team that's just clearly better than them. Jokic has actually said that Ayton has been the center that's causing the most problems all year. And so that's what we're going to see. The one spot that Denver could exploit Phoenix is getting DeAndre Ayton in foul trouble, because if you have Frank Kaminsky and or Dario Saric on the floor trying to stop DeAndre Ayton, that just ain't gonna happen. But I still think Phoenix wins it. Phoenix wins it in 6. Too much on the perimeter. Too much Devin Booker. Chris Paul is Chris Paul. Too much for that team to handle. Go to the top. If Utah faces Dallas, I have Utah in 6. If Utah faces the Clippers, I have Clippers in 6. Just matchups. Utah's a very, very sound team, and Utah's a much better team than Dallas. I think that as sound of a team as Utah is, the Clippers have too much star power and that they'd be able to beat Utah. I think if they can kind of get this burden off their back by beating Dallas, that they can roll through Utah. So there's my very quick but high level insights on how I see round 2 playing. As you can tell, a lot of injuries playing the parts in these series. Joel Embiid, James Harden, Chris Paul, even his shoulder, Donovan Mitchell, and who knows what's to come in this LA Dallas game.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of my second round, with starting with the Sixers and the Hawks, you know, I thought this would be, you know, Philly should have this in the bag, but now, of course, with Embiid's injury, we don't know. I think I would take the Sixers in 7 just to be safe, but you know, I think now it's going to be for sure like a long series, and the Hawks they very well could win. I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up winning. You know, Nets, Bucks. We already saw Game 1. No Harden. It just seems like the Nets. Like the more you watch them, it's like the more you realize they might be like a step above just about everyone else. And I believe I picked the Bucks to win in our predictions last episode, but I'm I don't know. I'm leaning a lot toward the Nets like now. It's one of those series I think could go either way. Nets already have a 1 game advantage. They're probably the more talented team, and they weren't even fully healthy last game. So, and like you said, Mike Budenholzer not really known for making too many adjustments in the playoffs. So I don't know. Probably the Nets in 6 or probably 7 if Harden doesn't play. So I believe that's the same prediction as what you had. Um, and then Suns Denver should be an interesting series. Probably the most entertaining one. Like these are two teams that haven't really accomplished much in their franchise history. So whether or not Jokic gets closer to winning a championship, or Chris Paul and Devin Booker as well. But I mean, I think mainly Chris Paul because he's been in the league so long, and I think that's the one thing that he wants left on his resume. That should be interesting to see. Probably Suns in six though, just like the hacker tweeted on Chris Paul's account like last week. Um, but yeah, and then if it's Jazz versus Mavericks, I'd probably say the Jazz in seven. Um, and if it's Jazz versus the Clippers, probably the Clippers in six. But one thing that would be cool if the Clippers win today against Dallas is that it would mean the whole Western Conference playoffs, like none of those teams remaining have a championship. And in terms of the whole NBA playoffs, there wouldn't be a champion since like 1983 with the 76ers. So you're going to see like some completely new champion. And I know like even if Dallas somehow pulled it off and won the whole thing, it's a completely different team than a decade ago when they beat the Heat in the finals with Dirk. But I don't know. I think that would just be something interesting to see as well. Um,
Yeah, I mean storylines coming off short off season. See, I think Dallas or Denver being the only team from conference finals last year to still survive through the first round. So completely different dynamic this year. Have some home courts. Crowds are starting to get bigger. But as we get closer to championship, man, each round just gets more and more exciting. So much more to play for.
yeah, and it should be fun. I mean, there's a lot of new faces, so that always makes things a little more spicy. But thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Any final thoughts?
Nothing from me, man. Just excited to watch.
Yeah, and likewise on this end. Stay tuned for more. We'll have a new episode probably around the time the second round's kind of closing up. Should be more solidified time of when that is too, because there's a lot of series. Sometimes they're always like overlapping. So hopefully that's not the case next time. But again, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and we're out. Peace.